Rukmini Poddar. How are you today?
Hey Ryan, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being on. Could not be more excited that you accepted my invite. You are a match made for this podcast, whether you know it or not.
I don't know it yet. You got to tell I will in this conversation.
Perfect. No, you definitely will. Absolutely perfect for myself and my audience and what I'm
Mm.
trying to get out here too. Do you consider yourself an author, creator, obviously an illustrator? What do you consider yourself?
I'm constantly juggling between all of that. Author is still new to me. I'm definitely a creator. I'm a creator and I'm an educator also. Those are two things I'm passionate about, and a published author. So that's just new. That's something I'm now sticking at the end of all of that.
That's super cool. So, Rukmini Poddar, you are the author, creator, illustrator, whatever you want to say about Draw Your Feelings. You have that listed here as an interactive guidebook to help you connect with your emotions and process them through art. And I was immediately attracted to everything about this. It was the art was like awesome. You have a wonderful style. I'm a graphic designer myself, went to art school, all
Mhm.
that good stuff. I have
Mhm.
complete respect. I don't I don't work in that realm of how you kind of draw and create and use watercolors and stuff like that. You have a great artistic ability. I love the fact that you're open and honest with your emotions, you're vulnerable. And I love the fact that you promote this to other people. What an absolutely great book. Just everything about this, I just support 1000%. So I
Hmm.
know I sent you a message already. Congratulations on this because I truly
Thank
mean
you.
that. I think the world needs more things
Mm.
like this. Everything about it. It's what a great outlet for people. And this is a great way to sit down and get in touch with their emotions and even like with other people. I know you do classes as well. Like just
Yeah.
wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Welcome to the
Oh,
podcast.
thank you, Ryan. Oh, I'm feeling that deeply in my heart. Thank you so much.
Yeah, how do you feel? Like not just me saying that, but like I'm sure you get a
Yeah.
lot of compliments and people reaching out to you that you've done this. Like, how does that make you feel?
I feel really reciprocated with, and I feel a lot of I actually really struggle to take praise, and this is a new
Mm,
experience for me. And so I'm a sort of opening myself up to it. And to be honest, this book, I feel like I wrote it for myself more than anyone else. And a friend told me recently that we teach what we need to learn.
mm,
And so I can never pretend that I already know this and I'm the teacher imparting my wisdom. It's like this book, this art was born from my own need of needing to process my feelings and understand it. And to really get to this place, it's still surreal, honestly. And I think because so much of the book I wrote a few years ago, and there's so much that's done like sort of in private, and it's such a like personal process that now when it's out, it's sort of shocking me that like, whoa, this is in the hands of people and oh my God, people like it. It's really life-giving and I have to really teach myself to like accept and believe it. Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna believe that this is really having an impact on you and I'm really grateful for that.
that's the best. So it's been out. We're recording this January, mid-January. It's been out since October, correct?
It has, yeah.
That's amazing. You know what? I'm gonna say, where can you people buy this book now? Because I really highly
Yes,
suggest people buy this. Where do you
you
get
can
it?
buy it. Really, any bookstore should have it. If they don't, you can make a request. Otherwise, go on Amazon. It's published through Penguin Random House. Go on my website. I have links for it. And it's actually, I don't know if you have any Polish or Spanish readers, but it's just been translated in Spanish, available in
Nice.
Spanish and in Polish. So that's just been also incredible to see it really taking off in different languages and countries too.
Well, the great thing about art, it can be translated into every
Yes.
language, right? I mean, it kind of is
Absolutely.
it's the original language.
Yeah, I think about emotions and art as universal languages. And so when I see people wanting to draw their feelings, it doesn't matter where you're coming from or what language you speak. It really is universal.
That's amazing. Okay, well, real quick, tell the listeners what this book is all about, and then we'll get to the backstory.
Yeah, it's a guidebook. I have, if anyone is seeing the video, I'm holding up right here. It is a big guidebook. It's about 200 pages. And the idea is whether you can draw or not, you can pick this book up and it'll take you on a journey of identifying your feelings, labeling it, drawing it, all the way to accepting your feelings. And so there's a chapter for everything. It really builds on itself. You learn the principles of visual design. You learn how to create a visual vocabulary for your feelings. There's a whole chapter on your relationship to yourself, your relationship to others, your relationship to your values. I really did pour everything I have into this book. And the idea is that you just get to meet a whole other side of yourself. You get to unlock that in a really accessible way. So I have done workshops for years, and that's where this was born. And the idea of this book is that this is like a workshop in your home, in the privacy of your home, wherever you're at. You can open it up, do exercises, and connect to that part of yourself that does love to create. Because a lot of people tell me that they are afraid of creating. And I like to tell them that, well, were you afraid when you were 5 years old?
Mm.
And usually the answer is no, they loved it. So connect back to that inner child and really explore yourself through art.
It's funny you just said inner child. I just wrote down my notes. This is very childlike. It kind of takes you back. And who doesn't like to go back and do things when they were a kid, like it's puzzles or drawing or
Yeah.
anything like that? It just kind of takes you back to when time was simple. Um,
Hmm.
what is the backstory? How did you get involved in the creation of this book?
Yeah, in some ways it really unfolded very organically, and I like to say that I was like pulled toward this book. I did not push my way into this. I did not knock on a million doors and get really rejected by a ton of publishers. I mean, in some ways it felt very, there was a real like ease of it happening. And then there's also many years behind the scenes of working on it. And I would say it started maybe 8 years ago when I first started to draw my own feelings through something called the 100-Day Project. So if anyone's not familiar, there is something like a global arts movement called the 100-Day Project, where very simply you do anything for 100 days, anything creative. It doesn't have to be drawing, it could be painting, singing, walking, but you do it for 100 days. You have some accountability, usually people post it on Instagram. And I did drawing my feelings for 100 days.
Where did that idea come
Base.
from to draw
So
your
it came
feelings?
from this project. Oh, the Draw Your Feelings. Well, I was always an artist. I was always creative. I went to art school as a graphic designer. And after I was graduating, I felt like a need to connect back to just painting again for the heck of it and having fun. And I was taking a bit of a gap year between work and between school, traveling. And I just felt like I was being confronted with myself. I felt like it's such a rich time in life, and I was, falling in love and breaking up and confused, and and something came to me that I wanted to document it more. So I was doodling around, and at some point I had these little pink figures, these little drawings, and that was my first self-published book, actually in 2016, called 100 Obscure Emotions.
Hmm.
And basically I drew something I called an obscure emotion. And at that time I had like a few hundred followers. I mean, it was a purely personal project. And it was really vulnerable, but I just felt like, hey, why not? Let me just throw these ambiguous drawings and see what happens. And I was always surprised by the messages I got from people saying, I've always felt this way and I never had words for it. And I think that was the beginning. That was the sense of like,
Wow.
whoa, there's something here. There's something universal about how personal we can get. And I think that has stuck with me to this day, that what is most personal is most universal. So the more personal you get with what you're sharing, the more universal you get actually, because we hit on the universal humanity of our emotions. And I think it's very healing for myself as an artist and for others to know that we're not alone in our experience.
Yeah, you said healing. I have written here therapeutic. Did you find this process like really therapeutic? And then it was kind of like, you know what, if this is helping me, perhaps this can help like countless of other people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. If it was therapeutic, it was like a mirror for myself. It felt like I was of service. Posting online at first is really nerve-wracking, and suddenly it felt connected to being of service to others, that actually my art and my words weren't meaningless. They were helping people to see themselves in my art. And that was really helpful too, that when I share my art, it's not just me promoting myself with a big megaphone. This is me and my feelings. It was me almost showing a mirror to others also. And I think that's what also keeps me going, this mood of artist service.
Now, it's one thing to be an artist, it's another to share it with the world. What was the moment that you realized, all right, like I'm going to put this into a book
Mhm.
and this is going to become a project for
Yeah.
other people too?
Yeah, there wasn't really one moment. It was a collection of years of doing this 100-day project. I mean, that's the thread that holds it together. Because after that first year, I really felt this transformation in myself. I felt like a lot of creative confidence. I felt that, especially as an artist, that creating doesn't just come from this inspiration that just happens once in a while. It's a real discipline. So there was something about the discipline of showing up every day, and the more I shared, the less scary it got. It became just part of my rhythm. So after that, I decided that like as long as I can, I'm gonna do a 100-day project every year. And actually, this is going to be my 10th year in a row doing it. And
Wow.
not every year I finish it, but every year at least I attempt it. And it's become almost like a spiritual practice for me, because now as so much has changed in those like 8, 10 years that I started. And I'm really feeling that I can lose that essence of just sharing vulnerably. So when the 100-day project comes around. And it's also like the official 100-day project has a start date. You can do it whenever you want, but I think this year it starts like mid-February. So in my head, I'm already thinking like, okay, there's this time that I'm going to put to my art. And anyway, to answer your question, that throughout the years, I just keep coming back to this practice that sharing is my way of serving. And that can be hard because sometimes sharing can be really vulnerable, and but it really is an important practice for me.
The more research I was doing on you, the more is like you're kind of doing two jobs in one, if you will. You are an artist, a creator, and also I want to say you're a therapist, but you're having people connect to their emotional side and their feelings. You going to graphic design school, I can relate to
Mhm.
that. You were
Yeah.
probably more so born creative, I'm going to imagine. Creativity is kind of maybe something you were kind of born with or started with earlier. When did the emotional side kind of come into play, and then the kind of realizing that therapy and connecting with your emotions was important?
Yeah, that came much later. And in some ways, looking back, maybe I was always interested in it, but I didn't even know I was until like I was 23, 24, like maybe 7 years, 7, 8 years ago. And I just started like absorbing books and absorbing material. And I started studying the Enneagram and different psychological frameworks, but nothing was like formally trained. So I'm a formally trained designer, but I don't have formal experience in therapy. And so sometimes, and it can even come up to this day of like a little imposter syndrome, like, who am I to share this? I don't have this background. But the truth is, it's simply my own experience that I'm sharing with others through art. And I guess I would say over the years, I've just been learning a lot just through myself and learning from others. And I would say it's just like a curiosity, and now it's like a hunger. So even now,
Mm.
as I'm putting stuff out there, I still remain a student. I've been really interested in parts work and internal family systems, and I'm taking, different courses online. But there was a point, actually, I would say in 2020 during the pandemic, I was having a slight crisis of what should I do with my life, as many
You and
people
everybody
probably did
else.
at that
Yeah.
time. And I was really looking at just going back to school and getting a master's in counseling and therapy. And I remember talking to many therapists about it, and they were kind of look at what I was doing and they're like, why don't you just keep doing what you're doing? And I was like, but shouldn't I get like the background? It's like, it'll come, like you're already on to something, like keep doing it. And so I really take those words to heart. And I never tell anyone I'm a therapist or have that background, but I do believe more and more the therapeutical nature of art. And that's what
Mm.
I'm bringing, that art itself is such a healing modality. And even teaching, this all came very organically. That started only, in the pandemic 2020. And again, like I said earlier, this whole journey has been one of me being pulled towards it. I would have never imagined myself doing this, 7, 8 years ago. It's just been one little door opening after another.
I hear you. I'm connecting with you on so many levels.
Yeah.
This podcast is about you, but just to kind of related to myself in
Yeah.
2020 is like 2020 is when I started the podcast. And then I'm interviewing all these
Mm-hmm.
amazing, incredible people. It's like, who am I to be interviewing these people? It's telling me their life
Mm-hmm.
stories and stuff, right? But it's like I'm a creator too, you know what I mean? And if not me, then who?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes. Oh, I agree with that.
I
Yeah.
connect with you on so many levels. What you mentioned imposter syndrome. I want to touch on
Yeah.
that because that is something so
Mm-hmm.
many of us have done episodes on that. So many of us have. What what
Mm-hmm.
got you over the barrier or continues to get you over the barrier? Because it's something
Mm.
that probably continues to pop up with imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah, it does. I feel like every time I hit a new level of achievement in myself, the imposter level it comes up too. And I joke often about I think 2021 is when I got the book deal, and that was just such an amazing moment of getting connected through Penguin Random House, Torture Perigee. And I remember when my now editor reached out to me. Basically, she loved my work on Instagram, and she kind of just sent me a cold email saying, "If you ever wanted to write a book, we're
That's awesome.
interested." And the pandemic hit at that time and I didn't hear back for a year. But during that time, I was developing these courses called Learn to Draw Your Feelings. And a year later, she sends an email and she goes, "Hey, you got a book yet?" Like that's all she said. And I could actually say, like, I have something. And I had this PDF workbook that I put together for my course. And I was like, it's an interactive guide to draw your feelings. Like this could be a book. And it was just amazing how easy it went. I mean, I've heard so many stories about how hard it is to pitch a book and how it's going to be difficult, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes when you're in the right pulse, it kind of comes at the right time. So she was
Mhm.
like, "Our team loves it. It's great. Like, here's an offer." And it was like, I just felt like amazed. It was like my childhood dream coming true. I can't believe how much ease that happened with. And the excitement was up. And then suddenly, boom, the imposter syndrome came up too. So it's like the minute you kind of rise to a new challenge, the mind and these parts of ourselves that get really like triggered by almost like afraid to grow, because when you grow, you have to let go of the other stuff, the fears that that comes up too. And I heard this great quote by what's his name? No, he wrote this book, The War of Art. um, it's an amazing book, by the way. I'll have to get
I've
back to
heard
it.
it is. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. But he writes this thing and he talks all about the resistance. And he says the biggest obstacle for an artist is something called the resistance, which could be your mind, your imposter syndrome, your self-sabotaging thoughts. And he says, the greater the purpose, the greater the resistance. So when you're doing something of great purpose, you're going to feel a hell of a lot of imposter syndrome. And that
Mhm.
has sort of helped me to reframe it and say, when I'm feeling like paralyzed imposter syndrome, it's because I'm doing something really important to me, to myself. And I still get it. And I sort of like trying to soften into it instead of like battling. I hear about battling imposter syndrome and overcoming it. I like to approach it from a sense of like softening into it. Maybe I'm not
Mhm.
ready to befriend my imposter, but like hearing it out, like, okay, there's a part of me that feels utterly unqualified and utterly incompetent, no matter where I am. I might be like a New York Times bestselling author, and that feeling will still be there.
Mhm.
And it's just really helpful for me to almost soften and be like tender to it. And I've been really curious about parts work recently, like the different parts of ourselves. And I think of this imposter syndrome as like small child that's like really afraid of leaving the known world, of being small and being invisible, and even good things can be really triggering to step into the limelight. So it's really helpful to just like, okay, let me just hear you out. And instead of identifying with that imposter syndrome and saying like, wow, I just suck, I am so incompetent, instead of doing that, kind of creating a little distance and saying, okay, there's a part of me that is so terrified of being called out as an imposter that when I put this book out there, everyone will know that I know nothing about emotions.
Mhm.
So there's a part with that fear, but somehow treating it a little tenderly and having that distance is so important. And I don't always do that. I do get lost and blended in with that part of me, but as a practice, trying to separate is really helpful. Really, really helpful.
I appreciate you sharing that. I don't remember where I it's either read or heard that you had imposter syndrome. I'm like, well, I got to ask her this because this is something that
Yeah.
the vast majority of us deal
Oh
with. There's
yeah.
no question about that. So was super curious to see how you battle it and continue to overcome that. It kind of reminds me like I tell myself the same thing. It's like these internal dialogues that we have with ourselves are just super important. And when
Hmm.
I'm nervous about something, whether it's like I don't know, anybody like going on a date or giving a speech in
Hmm.
front of somebody or an interview, right? When you're really nervous about something, it's like it's because you want it so bad. So a lot of times
Yeah.
I tell my mind that it's like this is so great to be in this position where I can possibly achieve something that I
Mm.
really want. And I just kind of try to perceive it like that. So I was just curious to see how you battle imposter
Yeah.
syndrome.
Thanks
So
for sharing. It really is so universal. And like you said, it's a similar conclusion I have, that I have imposter syndrome because this is really important to me. And that's
yeah.
just helpful to think of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're doing a great job so far, I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
I have a question for you that I didn't really prepare you for, but I'm kind of curious.
Yeah.
What have you learned about connecting with your emotions and how important it is since you started this process? It's a big
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I've just learned that it's like ongoing work, you don't really arrive to a destination. Um, and I'm continuously humbled by how much work I have to do. And
Mm,
that's where the imposter syndrome kicks in. I remember a week after this book came out, I was like, I kind of had a little downward spiral, and I was like, I have no right to tell anyone how to draw their feelings. And then, what I come to though is that again, I wrote the book that I need. I teach what I need to learn. And then what I need to learn is that for me, creativity is like a lifeline, and expression is really important. And I think everyone needs to process their feelings. And some people do it in different ways. Some people do it through movement, through walking, breathing, meditating, talking. But then there's a lot of people that find creativity to be really powerful. And it's really, for me and for many others I know, it's taking your insides and putting it outside. It's taking your
mm.
internal world and having an outlet for it. And I think there's something really validating and special, especially about seeing it visually. And so when I do engage in the arts and draw and create, there is like a sense of wholeness. I feel a little bit more like integrated as a human. I feel like, okay, um, the cycle is complete. I have feelings inside of me, I take it outside, I see it, I share it. It's all part of like this cycle of processing. And so that's how I experience it.
Do you feel this book has helped break down barriers for some people as far as like connecting with themselves and their emotions? Because I feel that therapy still gets a bad rap a lot. Mental health still gets kind of
Mm,
a bad rap.
hmm.
There's stigma. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I'm not going to a therapist, all that kind of stuff. I feel like this is a really good, almost like intermediate step. You're
Mm,
not going to a
yeah,
therapist, but you're connecting with your emotions in a fun, childlike way that's so simple. What do you
yeah.
have thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was my hope, honestly, that this is like it's either a resource when you're in therapy, or it's like a before stage to help
Mm.
you feel like these tools are accessible. Yeah, I forgot the first part of your question.
No, just do you feel that it's breaking down a barrier, perhaps?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
yeah.
that's my hope. And I do get a lot of messages from people actually saying like, thank you so much. Or some people send me photos of like the pages that they've drawn. And really it's the workshops, because I see it in real time when I'm kind of guiding people. And that's what gave me a lot of faith in this process.
Mm.
I see people who say like, I have not picked up a pencil since I was a kid. I feel intimidated. I don't want to do this. And by the end of the process, they're literally in tears. And they said, I didn't know I felt this way. And that just gives me like goosebumps, because it also, you know, it shows the power of the process. Even if I was a totally crappy facilitator and I wasn't doing this well, just putting these materials in someone's hand and giving them permission to create is like a game changer. We don't know the ways that people are suffering and just really needing an outlet like this.
That's amazing. I can't imagine how good that makes you feel when you get feedback like that. You don't have to be
Mm.
a therapist, right? I mean, you basically created a platter for somebody to say, here you go. This is a resource to get in touch with your
Mhm.
feelings. I don't need to be involved. But here you go. Like you said, it's like an intermediate step or step one
Yeah,
into that. That's
absolutely. It's a whole it's resources. Thank you. And you know what I'm
awesome.
realizing is that there's a whole, I want to know, I don't know if it's industry, but there's a lot of people out there who don't necessarily have to be therapists, but they could be facilitators, guides, coaches who have resources and tools that they can give to people. And that's really helpful also for people to know if they want to step before therapy to try resources like this for themselves.
So cool. This one is near and dear to me, and I hope there is progress on this part. So before we started recording, I told you I'm going to become a dad here in the next couple of months.
Hmm.
So I'm starting to look into things in a different perspective and what's going to be important to my son and things I want him to learn. I want this to be in grade school. I think
Oh, yes.
this could be one of the greatest things that a teacher can give a classroom and
Hmm.
say, all right, everybody, we're going to spend an hour drawing like how you feel, XYZ. And then the kids are learning how to be creative and connect with their emotions. They're learning how to share their emotions with their colleagues and friends at school.
Hmm.
There's so much benefit that I feel if we can get this into schools, if it's not already, I have to know, has there been talk about that? Is that happening?
Yes, first of all, thank you. You're speaking my heart. This is one of my big goals from writing this book. Even though it's not technically for children, so many exercises are absolutely accessible for kids. And yeah, I'm in conversation actually. I see the possibility. The vision that you have is so mine that like every school, every art department should have this. I know there's so many art classes kids have gone through that they haven't had healing experiences. They feel intimidated. They feel like, oh, I'm not drawing well, I'm not an artist, but art should be, art should be healing. It should be such a place of self-discovery for kids. And there is some improvement, there's not improvement, there's some opportunities opening up. I'm talking with a school in London that's creating a new what's the word? Like instruction or I'm forgetting
Curriculum?
the word, but yeah, curriculum for personal development. They're looking into it. So that's really
Wow.
exciting. And I just hope that once that starts, maybe it'll pick up in other places too.
Oh, for sure. I'm not even thinking art, like art department. I'm just thinking like this
Yeah, yeah,
becomes, yeah,
yeah.
this becomes just part of a third grader or a fourth grader's
Yeah.
just every Friday or something. Because
Hmm.
here's the thing, like especially being a male, is I'm taught to suck it up, get over it, deal with it. That type of this is how we grew up. I can't imagine the world
Hmm.
is if we were taught when you were younger to tell me how do you feel? How does this make you feel?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
talk about it in front of others. I can't
Yeah.
imagine
Oh,
a foundation of that and what that would do for people. Like I wouldn't feel the way I feel sometimes about like I can't share the way I feel. I can't cry in front of somebody. What I mean, I gotta hold it
yeah.
in. I can't tell somebody I love them because it sounds weird or whatever. Like this, oh my God, this could be
Mm.
literally like groundbreaking. I don't mean to overstate it, but it could be groundbreaking
No,
if we if kids learn this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love it. And, I just feel like the passion and urgency in your voice, and I totally agree. And I so much appreciate also your perspective from a man's perspective too, because
Mm.
I think there's something especially difficult for men to get permission to share their feelings.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of one, if I could rewind time, but two, also like knowing I'm gonna have a son. And when he comes
Yeah.
home from school, I would love to be like, so what did you do? What'd you do today? What you learn today? And he'd be like,
Yeah.
I drew my feelings. And then I can see what he drew and I can see if he's like angry or upset. We can talk about it and I can
Yeah.
learn what's going on in my kid's life. There's nothing more than I want than have good open communication
Mhm.
with my son to know what's going on, how he's feeling. And I need to tap into that. And I think this is just like a freaking like the best way I can think of doing that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, first of all, your child's very lucky to have such a caring father who's already so invested in their emotional life. That's special. And
Thank you.
I totally agree. I mean, just the idea that, and it's so possible, kids creating, I imagine creating their color spectrums of all
Oh
the
yeah.
different emotions they're feeling. And suddenly it's like sometimes we kind of choke up when it comes to talking about our feelings. Oh, we don't have the vocabulary. But when you have colors, it just opens up a whole conversation. It's like, oh, I'm feeling really yellow today. Oh, what does yellow mean? It means, oh, but there's some like blacks and reds. Oh, tell me about that. Is that your anger? And it's like the curiosity and the whole different medium to express yourself can be so, so powerful. So
Mm.
I'm with you on that. I see it happening, we're praying to the art gods and whatever it takes.
I would love that. I'm a full supporter of that. A question that I had personally, I'm going to ask you, this is kind of like off the radar a little bit. Do you, or are you aware of synesthesia? Do you know what that is?
No.
So
Mm-mm.
synesthesia, and I wouldn't be surprised, a lot of artistic people have this. I actually have part of it, is the blending of senses when you're younger. There's different, it's like when people see music, or when I kind of have it where different colors mean like, or different letters have like different colors, or different months, different dates have like different colors to me or whatever.
Oh,
It's
wow.
blending. So when I started to look more into this book, and I was like, I wonder if that's something you possibly have. It's very much into artistic people, or people that create music. So I was just
Oh,
curious.
amazing. I've never heard of that word before, but that is so fascinating because so much of the exercise this is about seeing colors and what sounds is what colors. So that's very cool.
So there is a term for that. Yeah, look it up. It's called synesthesia. Not
Okay.
that I'm a huge fan of Kanye West, but no, that's something he's rapped about a few times. He calls himself a genius or whatever. I'm not going there, but
Yeah, yeah.
he does talk about that in some of his music. So I was just curious. Um,
Okay.
as an artist, do you critique the book that is printed? Do you ever look
Yeah.
at it and like, I wish I didn't do that, or I wish that looked differently? I know when I print something, it's like this, it's
Yeah.
gone now. I can't do anything about it now. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think a lot of that happened before it was done. And now I'm sort of like, maybe this is for the best. I kind of just, it feels like a whole other entity from when I was creating it. When I was creating it, it was just perpetually unfinished. It was perpetually something wrong with it. It was
Mhm.
very hard to feel like satisfied in all the areas. And that's when and then maybe every author and artist has to come to this place that like finished is better than,
Yeah.
imperfect, but not. So yeah, I have a funny story actually. I This book was almost done for months and it was like sort of just hanging there for months and I was delaying the deadline and there was just a lot of procrastination leading up to it. And I was talking to a friend about like a creative way to re-engage with my book and really finish it. And it was so funny. What we came up with was that I should take my book out on a date and have a hard conversation. And so I literally like scheduled in my calendar to go out to a coffee date. I took my manuscript with me and a journal and I just started writing. And I have the writing. I posted part of it on Instagram some months ago. It's so funny now, but it was so real and it sounded full on like a breakup letter. It was like, dear book, like it's you, it's not me. Or I'm really tired of how things are going. Like I have a lot of withholds against you. And there's even some resentment, but I don't want it to be like that. And I just poured it out. And it's so interesting because the book was like a real entity. And I was able to like fill up 3 full pages about like, I want our relationship to be better. I'm tired of, I'm using you as an excuse to hold back on my life moving forward. I mean, it was very real. So not exactly a critique, but a real relationship with it. And that was like a great ritual to like really acknowledge my own feelings and acknowledge that this is like a living relationship with this book. And I've written quite a bit to this book over some time. And sometimes I would write like, yeah, book, like you have so much potential and I'm holding you back because I want you to be perfect, but you're already out there and I want to release you into the world. And so in some ways it was a whole process actually. So at this point I see the book and I'm just really proud of it. I just see it as like my a little baby that's separate from me now having its own identity and its own journey.
Where in the world did that idea come from to take it on a date? That's brilliant.
I know. I love it. It was some kind of wild co-creation that we came up with together.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm getting the sense here, like you are very aware and self-aware, and you try to find different avenues. I mean, first you started by, you know, drawing your feelings, creating art. That's your outlet. And then you came up with the idea of I'm going to take my book on a date to get past this. I
Yeah.
and imposter syndrome. You find these methods
Yeah.
that work for you. It's like you're finding ways to
Mm.
hack yourself that are super creative. And
Mm.
I even just taking something on a date. Like I hope someone hears that and is like, that's a great idea. I'm going to go do this for
Try
X, Y,
it.
Z.
Totally. If you're struggling with something or someone just, or even like an inanimate project or a problem, somehow find a way to take it out on a date. See how you can do that
So
and have a
cool.
hard conversation.
So cool. I know we touched on being a man versus women and everything. I'm just
Mhm.
curious, do you have data or stats on like who uses the book or the buyers or anything like that? Like is it skewed?
Yeah. Not so much on the book, I'm not sure, but just over time, just looking at my own audience through like marketing, social media, and workshops, it's like 80, 20, 90, 85, 15. So men are just on a very small percentage. And it's not surprising, but I love it when men do come to my workshops and they show interest, but it's not so much.
That's what I'm talking about. So what do we do? You know what I mean? Like what do we
Yeah.
do? I mean, besides just have these open conversations, is that on your mind? Are you going to try to
Yeah.
attack that?
It's Yeah, it's something that I'm really interested in doing more of. And I'm feeling like, yes, I can have a change in that, but I really see an impact coming with other men kind of voicing that, which is like awesome, the conversations you're having actually, because I'm not a man myself, of course, but I do know that when other men talk about it, I think it gives a little bit more permission actually for men to hear and respond. And something interesting also about my husband is that he's really passionate about this, about like coaching for men and emotional development for men. And I am so inspired by that because I think that's something that he might even have more influence than me doing. For him to be vulnerable and for other men to see that could possibly impact them more. So in some ways, that's important to me, but I also love when I see other men doing that. So yeah, I see my husband kind of as an example, and I think that's really exciting that he's really kind of narrowing into that focus too.
Oh, that's great. So when you host these classes, so it's like the live ones, is that something you kind of notice like immediately you pick out and
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. If there's a
yeah,
guy like, wow, rare specimen.
right?
1 out of 50. Yeah.
Well, geez, guys, if you're single, sign up. I mean, come on, like you never
Yeah,
know.
yes. Girls would get very impressed.
Well, honestly, I mean, that's 100% true. It's like if you are a male that learns to tap into their emotions, become very self-aware. I was telling my wife a few weeks ago, self-awareness is the most attractive trait anybody can have. You can't tell me otherwise. No one's
Mhm.
perfect, but if you're very self-aware, I want to be friends with you. I want you in my life.
Yeah.
We could talk about anything. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, it is really disappointing. Like I said, a lot of us men were just kind of taught, like, get over it, suck it up. You don't really talk
Yeah.
about it. You can't cry in front of people, stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
know.
I have a question, sorry,
Yeah.
about this topic with men because in some sense I wonder, in some sense, yes, it's disappointing, but in other sense, there's like a bigger problem of like the suffering that men go through, and maybe you can answer this more. It's like because there's so much suffering and there's not enough of a space for them,
Mm.
and maybe they don't, maybe space with other men is helpful, and maybe they don't have those areas, but I just wonder about the suffering that men carry that is so unspoken and so unacknowledged. And I wonder how creating space for men to first just access their suffering can really lead to transformation.
Yeah. Well, I think vulnerability is very much seen as a weakness for a man.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so Brene Brown, I'm sure you're familiar with who
Mm-hmm.
she is.
Yeah.
What a wonderful author. I know she's given permission, but like you said, she's a woman. I do see a lot of like, I can see a lot of like men in a room being like, "Ooh, this is weird, sharing my feelings to other men. This is still kind of weird, right?"
Yeah.
It's almost like they need their role model or
Yeah, exactly.
right, their
Hmm. They have to
influencer.
see it modeled.
They have to see it modeled. Someone they
And
look
there's
up
so
to.
much, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I really feel like the father-son dynamic is so prevalent in men's lives,
Yeah.
and very often, a lot of men have estranged relationships from fathers, and they really don't see their fathers modeling any type of vulnerability, and I think that's what perpetuates it too.
100%, because our dads are worse than we are. I mean, they're taught to
Yeah,
toughen up. Therapy was not really of anything unless you were crazy 20, 30, 40
yeah,
years ago, right? And that was seen as a weakness. I can't cry in front of my kids. I can't do
yeah.
any of that stuff, right? So that's something like I want to be super aware of. It's slowly fading, right? I mean, slowly, but
Hmm.
not fast enough. I mean, that's something what's really interesting is what you said. I'll be honest here is like my dad will listen to this. He listens to all my podcasts. So hi dad.
Oh.
Is my dad and I had that father son relationship growing up. It
Mm,
was tough love, suck it up, play hurt, like get a
mm,
job, like that type of thing. And I learned a lot from that. There is something to learn from that. Little less I love yous, little
hmm.
less affection, physical affection. And when you get older as a son too, you're like kind of like pushing that away as well. Like, "Ooh, that's not cool. I don't want to hug
Yeah,
my dad and
yeah,
stuff." So
yeah.
I get that. But now that he's older, I think he's had way more self-awareness. And now he's gone through therapy and stuff. And now
Mm,
I
mhm.
have a better relationship with him now as far as like emotions, talking about things and feelings than I did 10, 20, 30 years ago. So
Mhm.
very proud to say that my relationship with my dad has gotten a whole lot closer. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm thankful for that. And I'm 41. There's a lot of men out there that don't get that opportunity. Their father has passed away. Their father will not change, will not go to therapy,
Yeah.
will not, you know what I mean? So I'm happy. So dad, thank you for doing that. But there's probably the vast majority of men out there, their dads aren't going to change. It is what it is. So
Mhm.
I I was doing a lot of thinking last night knowing this podcast was coming up. And that's why I was
Mm.
like, I think art, just sitting down drawing or being creative, you don't have to go to a therapist and sit there and talk about your feelings. You don't have to do that to connect with yourself and how you're feeling. You can just do this. And I think it's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, you can even talk about art. There's something, I don't sell them anymore because I ran out, but I at one point I produced these art card decks based on some of the series of obscure emotions. And it was so fascinating because I played with it with my parents and my husband's family from India, who like this is not something that they usually do. And one way that I play with is I have them pick up three cards and they kind of represent your past, present, and future. You flip it over and you have to talk about what you see. And I wish I had an example here somewhere, or again, this will be on video,
Mhm.
but okay, here I have one more personal card deck. And it's a lot of these art images that don't have words but are very evocative. And I've had amazing conversations with men also, like just different family members. And basically they process their feelings by looking at a card in real time with you. So I say, what's happening in the image? They share it. Does this relate to a part of your life? Yeah, this looks like this time. And, this represents the way I feel really a lot of pressure on me. And this is really difficult. And then it's, again, it can be simple, I guess is what I want to say, that it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be this intense therapy experience, but sometimes you could just look at an image and ask questions to each other. And it can be really surprising what comes.
So I'm curious because you get to see some of these images, whether it's like online in a class, perhaps live in person, or you get sent them in a DM or email or something like that. Do you see differences as far as cultures go across the globe?
You mean when it comes to
What
processing
their
feelings?
emotions and feelings look like? Do you see differences?
Oh, haven't really seen so much difference. Like in one sense, I see more similarities, like a lot of universality. But just coming from an Indian background, I know some of the differences. Like I
Mm.
know, coming from Asian backgrounds, India, China, all that stuff. It's like it's even more suppressed of like sharing emotions, it's kind of like even more taboo to express yourself. And then also my husband, who's from India, he says like, okay, being a man itself is difficult. Being a man from India, I mean, like people don't talk about feelings. It's so like tabooed upon. And I just find that really fascinating, him kind of breaking that mold and then just having conversations with other family members. And then what comes out, like at the same time, there's so much beautiful music in different countries and
Yeah.
cultures. And so I feel like emotions get processed in different ways also.
I didn't know they had more suppressed cultures over there.
Yeah. Oh my God. You look at Japan, China, India. In one sense, all the emotions comes out through like music and Bollywood and cinema. But when it comes to conversations, it's really difficult. People just don't have that for different reasons. And sometimes third world countries also, like I've talked to some people and they said, wow, emotions, like I didn't have time for emotions growing up. I was trying to survive.
Mm,
And sometimes that also gives me a reality check that in some ways, some people see emotions as a privilege. Like, well, it's time to talk about feelings. Like, I'm trying to get food on the table. And that's just a whole other paradigm, also.
interesting. I thought maybe you would say you would have seen some cultures be perhaps like darker in colors, more blacks, dark in some color,
Oh,
more
okay, okay.
vibrant and more alive, and
Yeah.
that'd be interesting. Huh.
That could be in a macro scale, but when it comes to individuals, it's so everyone is just so different themselves.
Yeah,
And more often than not, it's the similarities. I'm like, wow, we are just a big human family, you know? People feel all the same feelings, and it's very interesting.
it is interesting because you think of how divisive this country is, especially like right now.
Yes.
And then you go down to the roots of it, right? Of like everything that we have in common. You got to feel like 80% of every human has like something in common with like all these emotions. We all feel the same things, certain things make us feel
Yeah.
good, make us feel bad. It's just it's like the older we get, like I am thinking like childlike, how innocent we are, and the older we get, like our society and things we're supposed to learn or supposed to do, and all these things, all the supposed tos, how they influence who we are and how
Yeah.
we feel, and like social media now, just like, I wish I could go back
Yeah.
when times were simple.
Totally. When it was simple, I really feel like the divisiveness we feel, I mean, I feel like it's so imposed on us. Like I feel like naturally we are connected people and society has imposed so much divisiveness.
Mm.
And I one of my dreams is actually to do like conflict resolution in this way because bringing people together who have such different political beliefs and ideologies, like when you just get to the root of the suffering, it's similar. I mean,
Oh
the
yeah.
end of it, we're all just suffering and we want relief and we want connection. And I think that's a universal thread that if we can get to, people who are on two ends of the spectrum politically or whatever can really find connection and actually understand each other. But it makes us have to get underneath all of that stuff, the
Yeah.
divisiveness, and just get to those core emotions.
Oof. Everyone wants to belong, right? Isn't like tribalism like one of like the initial like
Yeah,
foundations? Have you read the book The
yeah.
Four Agreements?
Oh, years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking because like I reread it again when the January 1st. I was like, oh, I'm going to reread this or whatever. And
Mm,
I was kind of like, you didn't choose your religion. You didn't choose the things that your parents tell you, right? And it's just like,
mm,
as you get older, I think you just said like these things are imposed upon you, like what you're supposed to
yeah.
think or supposed to believe. So it's
Mm.
truly interesting. How have your images changed over time, your drawings?
Yeah, in some ways they might have gotten more refined as this has become more and more professional, more, bringing more digital and things like that. But I feel like the essence is still the same. To be honest, some of my very early drawings are still my favorite. The ones that are like kind of messed up and
Mm,
little like imperfect and still have pencil marks on it. So there's something that was really honest about those images. And I feel like aesthetically, my style has refined. But sometimes I really want to come back to that old spirit of my drawings because I really believe that like messy, imperfect images are honest, and honesty is always attractive. So honest images are the best.
do you feel that your drawings changed on the environment that you're in?
Oh, hmm. It could be. It could be. Yeah, in some ways, drawing style is like a breathing, living thing. It continuously kind of shifts and flows. And sometimes I try to break out of it also just to not feel too constrained in a style.
Mm. I was listening to a couple of your podcasts recently, and I could not help but relate you to like a musician or an artist that's recording an album,
Mm.
about like you needing to sit down and get your feelings out and draw and just kind of like releasing it to the world. And I can imagine how like being in an environment would really play a role in what you're putting out there, whether it's
Ah, yes.
where you're located, like the house you might be living in, the neighborhood, the state, like anything like that, the weather, all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff would really play a role.
Yeah. That's a good point. When I travel, when I have space, when I'm in nature, the inspiration that comes is very different. And to be honest, my art making practice has shifted a lot last few years as I've put a lot more energy in my book and in my teaching. I'm putting less energy in creating art. And that's been hard because it's so
Mm.
important to me personally. And I'm trying to like balance all these things now professionally. And I think that also affects my art. And so it's making me more mindful as the year has just begun. Like, where can I like escape to make art? So it's true, space makes a difference. Or where can I like, yeah, just really get back to the heart of what I do creatively. So that's just like a something I'm currently working on, how to balance all of that.
Do you meditate or is this your meditation?
Ah, interesting. I do have a meditation practice also.
Yeah,
But this is, I would say, is a form of meditation. I do a lot of journaling every day too. That's a form of meditation. But I do a little like sit down mantra meditation.
you are super self-reflective. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
How often would you say you sit down and go through this process of creating feelings? And like for somebody that buys your book, what would you say perhaps is like a good rhythm to dive
Oh,
into it?
yeah. Actually, in the introduction, I talk about that, like setting yourself up for success. And I usually think I would say regularly in small increments is better than like 2 hours a week or something. If you can do like 10 minutes of just like touching the book a day, that's awesome. If that's too much, then set like a sacred creativity day once a week and have like a space because space really carries energy. Create like
Mm,
a table that like has your art supplies, has a little candle. You can be like, okay, Saturday mornings is like when I come to the space or me and my partner. And when you ritualize it, it definitely it creates like a very powerful rhythm.
mm. And for the people listening to this that are like, okay, I'm interested in this. I'm not artistic at all. I can't draw a stick figure. What would you tell these people?
I would tell them you're my favorite kind of students. Really, I do so many workshops and there's always people like this. And I ask if there's anyone who's terrified about like just being creative. And there's so many reasons to be terrified by it. Some people feel like incompetent or just they've had bad experience as a kid with their art classes, or just it feels a little too uncomfortable. It's not as structured as things that they're used to. And I usually just really try to guide them to, that inner critic that's telling these things, just leave it at the doorstep. It'll be
Mm,
back. It'll be there when you come back to it if you want. And really engage in this beginner's mindset where you are really tapping into that inner 5-year-old. You're having fun and really enjoy the process. So I always talk about process over results. So it's not about creating a pretty picture. It's about how are you feeling when you're putting your marks on paper, when your pencil is sliding through the paper. Just get really in tune with that feeling and start to enjoy that process.
mm.
And if anything, just see it as self-care. Like this is your creative self-care time. Make a mess, have fun, see what happens, get curious.
This is where the childlike thing comes back into play again for me, thinking about like
Yeah.
nobody cared at 5 years old about like judging someone else's artwork, right? But like the older you get, it's more it's like, this isn't good. This
Yeah.
isn't good. It's not as good as theirs. You know, they compare everything. And for
Yeah, it's
going
like
back
when
to
did we get
basics.
so yeah, we got so complicated. We were so free and bold as a kid. I mean, every kid not only likes to draw, but like declares they're an artist to the world. And now, even as a professional artist, I'm like, but am I an artist? It's like we've put art making on such a pedestal, and
Mm,
then there's so much social media and there's so much comparison that it's just lost its essence. When art making is just expression.
mm.
It's literally just expressing your voice to the world, which I think every human being has a right to be able to do that.
Love it. And comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so true.
what is on deck for you? What can we expect from you down the road?
Oh, that is a good question. Um, Definitely more teaching. I think starting in the summer, I'm really excited to put my book together as a course. I am creating more art. I'm taking a little respite the next month or so to create some art, which I'm excited for. And I did a soft launch of something called the Feelings Club, which is an online membership. So that's like a little bit more of an exclusive space that you can come in, have more access to me. And I do workshops every month. I do studio hours. I give little workbooks. So I'm hoping to open that up and really like invest a lot more energy into building community outside of social media. For me, that's really exciting. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
That's amazing. All right, so I got to ask, where can people find you and work with you?
Yes, so find me first of all on Instagram. That's where I'm quite active, sharing a lot of artwork through Rock and Rooksy is my username, and my website has all information about me and also information about workshops. So dearrooksy.com. You can find info about my book, my art prints, and most of all, if you want to do a workshop with me, and if you're interested in also bringing me on board to your company or your team, to facilitate workshops. I love doing that. So please do reach out.
That's a great idea. I saw you do work with companies. Like I know I was talking about classrooms and kids earlier. That's
Mhm.
even awesome too. Because God knows, like we've all, if you've been in the corporate world, we've all been a part of those weird icebreakers or group activities, or like this is super cheesy or whatever. But this, I think this would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
really cool. I would appreciate
Oh,
this. So
thank you. Yeah, that's been new and exciting for me because I've actually been out of the corporate world for a long time. I don't even know if I've probably ever been in it. So I've always had an assumption that these people would not care about drawing their feelings. And I've been so surprised at how much they actually want it, how much benefit there is. So that was an assumption on my part. And I'm very happy to know that in corporate teams, this could be really relevant.
It's a nice way of connecting people too, especially for the ones that are working remote. They don't really have that human connection.
Yeah.
So much potential, so much
Yeah.
potential. But
Oh, thank you.
congratulations on the success you've already had. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to overstate things, but I see the potential in this being bigger than it already is because of what it can
Mm.
offer people. And I'm really excited for you. I'm gonna be an advocate for this for as
Oh.
long as long as I can go. Because like I said, once I have my son and he starts going to school and stuff, I'm gonna remember this book and I'll be
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah. You reach out. By then, hopefully there's a Draw Your Feelings kids version. There's multiple sequels. Like let's see that happen.
that's awesome. All right. Well, as we wrap it up, I'll hand the mic to you. Do you have any final words of advice or last things you want to say?
Mm. Yeah, well, I just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And really, for anyone listening, I just want to encourage them to use their voice, however that is, because there's a lot of healing in using your voice. And if that's through drawing, through painting, give it a shot, see what comes out for you, and just don't be afraid to hold back what you have to offer.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well said. You're welcome back anytime. Keep up the good work and
Thank you very
super
much.
excited where this goes.
Thanks, Ryan.